For creating these legs, we are going to make a jig, so cut out a square of 1/4 inch plywood that's about 20 inches by 8 inches. I designed the table legs on SketchUp, and then I used my laser to trace them out. But for you guys that don't have a laser, down in the description I will have a printout, and then you can just trace it on your own piece of wood. Now that it's traced out, I'm going to use my bandsaw to cut it out, but for you guys at home that don't have one, you can also just simply use the jigsaw. Right now I have this Central Machinery bandsaw, but honestly if I was going to get another one, I would probably spend the extra $100 on the Grizzly, or even just $150 on the Win one from Home Depot. One thing I neglected to do whenever I first started woodworking was to wax my equipment. And I just use this Minwax paste finishing wax now, but I use it on my table saw and bandsaw and the jointer, everything that wood runs across, and it makes a world of difference, not only in how your wood runs across it, but also protecting, especially your table saw, from rust. With this stuff, you just wipe it on and let it sit for about 20 minutes, and then buff it out. When cutting out the jig, bring the blade as close to the line as you feel comfortable with. After we have all the cuts made, we'll just sand down to the line. For sanding these contours, I like to use this cylinder sanding bit for the impact drill. I will try to link everything in the description, but you can pick one of these up at Lowe's. It does have a tendency to make your drill extremely hot if you run it for too long. I'm cutting the legs out of 2x8s. It just gives me a little more area to decide on what the grain's going to look like. While we have a second, I'm asking that you guys like and subscribe to the channel to help it grow. In return for your support, I will keep the content coming and make the videos better and better. After I had them all traced out, I decided to cut out with my jigsaw. And then I remembered that my old jigsaw roused my brain, so I'm switching back to my bandsaw. This bandsaw is not perfect, but it's definitely easier than using the jigsaw. You definitely don't have to run it across the joiner, but since I had it out, I went ahead and decided to do each face just to flatten them out and get any marks off. When using the joiner for any of your boards, just make sure to keep most of the pressure on the out feed. If you put it on the in feed, then it'll end up putting a curve in the wood. If you don't have a router table, you can just take your time with the jigsaw and sand down to the line on all those legs. The router table is just a little bit more of an efficient way to get perfect legs. The router table I have here is the Skil router table and router combo. It only comes in at about $160, so totally worth it if you guys are looking for one. The best way to put the templates on is to use super glue like I have here, but also the way I think I like even more is to use double-sided tape. I feel like it holds better and is easier to pull off. A heads up too, for the router bits themselves, there's kind of 3 options. You got a compression, a spiral, and then a straight edge. The one I have here is a straight edge, so it's only really good for doing with the grain cuts, not the end grain. If you want to do the whole thing around and do the end grain, you're going to want a compression bit. So here, I'll just take it down the sides and the other side, and then I'll actually cut the ends. Here you'll see the reason I actually like using the double-sided tape is because just with a screwdriver I can pop it off and then roll the tape off real easily. Before taking the jig off, I went ahead and marked the bottom lines so I could take it over here to the miter saw and get the bottoms cut. With that router bit I used not being able to cut the end grain, I didn't want to take the chance of getting some tear out, so I cut it a little short and then cleaned up these contours with the bandsaw before I sanded them. Most efficient way to start the sanding process I found was to just clamp all the legs together and then run your sander across the side and flip them over. For this part of sanding, I started at 120 grit and then went straight to 180 grit. For sanding the front faces of these, or for really any small item, I like to put down this furniture blanket. I picked this one up from Harbor Freight when they were having a deal on these that were like $3 per blanket, so I picked up a couple of these. Not only handy around the shop, but you definitely want a couple of these if you're going to start delivering some of your furniture or pieces to your clients. To add a little dimension and texture to these legs, I decided to get my 1/4 inch cove cutting bit and route around the edges of the legs. You definitely want to get your stain on your legs before you attach them to the table, or else it just becomes a big mess and you start getting stain everywhere if you try to do it after. I created these little stands for the legs just out of some scrap wood and using brad nails. I'm going to use pocket holes to screw the legs into the top, but only the top. So make sure you only do pocket hole screws on one side that you plan on being the top of the leg. Here's the reason I didn't do pocket holes on the bottom, because it's easy enough to attach it through underneath and use some countersink for the screws. Before shooting the screw underneath, make sure to add some glue for some extra strength. Run this screw almost all the way up, but before you fully tighten, go ahead and adjust the leg, making sure it's straight. Use a wet rag to wipe the squeeze out from the glue. After getting the pocket holes shot into the top, you're all done. I did use some oil-based polyurethane to finish the project. Thank you guys for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed.